Hello everyone, welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we are reviewing round 3 of the 2023 season where we are off to Australia for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. Before we get going, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel, Hit the Apex, the F1 channel and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. We will get going then, and we will start with practice 1, where Verstappen led Hamilton and Perez during first practice at Albert Park. Max Verstappen set the pace during Friday's first free practice session for the Australian Grand Prix, leading the way from Mercedes rival Lewis Hamilton and Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez at a cloudy but dry Albert Park circuit. After their back-to-back 1-2 finishes in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, Red Bull continued where they left off in FP1 as Verstappen headed straight out on soft tyres to lead the opening exchanges from Perez, who began his session on mediums. Red Bull's early laps also offered a glimpse at the upgrades they brought down under, with the already rapid RB19 sporting a new front wing end plate, additional front wing changes and a tweak to rear end bodywork to aid cooling. Mercedes are the other top 4 team to add new parts this weekend, running upgraded floor edge vanes on their soon-to-be revised W14, but there are no fresh developments for Ferrari or Aston Martin. After a flurry of mid-session lap times, reigning double world champion Verstappen firmly held P1 on 1 minute 18.790 second laps, which was half a second clear of Perez, albeit with the Mexican's best effort coming on the mediums. Perez slid his way through turn 3 when he switched to soft tyres before a lack of GPS, which caused some traffic confusion and several near misses, triggered a red flag and meant he finished without a time on the red marked rubber. Despite his comfortable advantage, it was not all plain sailing for Verstappen as he reported terrible gear shifts, rear brake trouble when he dipped a couple of wheels on the grass at the exit of turn 11 and then had a spin at turn 4 late on. Having saved a huge slide through turn 9, Hamilton delivered a late improvement on softs to split the Red Bulls in his Mercedes, with Fernando Alonso taking 4th for Aston Martin, followed by the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Lando Norris put his McLaren 7th on the timesheets, and as Alpine's Pierre Gasly, the other Mercedes of George Russell and the other Aston Martin and Lance Stroll rounded out the top 10. Alex Albon was the fastest of the Williams drivers in 11th, in front of home favourite Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas and Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri. Logan Sargent had a tricky first session as he reported bottoming so much I can't even see before his Williams grounded to a halt late on and signalled another red flag amid apparent technical problems, leaving him 15th ahead of Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Yuki Tsunoda was 17th in his AlphaTauri after a wild spin at turn 1 that almost ended in the barriers as the Alfa Romeos of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu and Kevin Magnussen's Haas, another to survive moments at turn 3 and turn 10, completed the field. Second practice at Albert Park is scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. local time on the Friday. We will move on to practice 2 then, where Alonso was fastest for Aston Martin before rain falls on Albert Park. Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso set the fastest time in FP2 before the rain came down over Albert Park, leaving Charles Leclerc 2nd for Ferrari and Max Verstappen 3rd for Red Bull. First practice for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix saw Verstappen set the pace in front of Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez under cloudy skies at Melbourne, but the opening session was also stopped by a red flag triggered by a lack of GPS before Logan Sargent's Williams came to a halt and brought out the second stoppage of that hour. After 20 minutes of FP2, Alonso was top of the timesheets with a lap of 1 minute 18.887 seconds. Leclerc was 0.445 seconds back in P2, and Verstappen was 0.615 seconds off Alonso in P3. Carlos Sainz in P5 and Leclerc broke the silence, every driver back in the pitch due to the rain. with some sighting runs on softs, but they confirmed that the track was too wet for slick running. Shortly after the Ferraris braved the track on soft tyres in the rain, Alpine's Esteban Ocon in P6 and Hamilton in P13 emerged on intermediate tyres, and the rest of the field followed suit, although the field duly remained unchanged. Drivers did relish their first runs in the 2023 cars in damp conditions, and the track was abuzz with activity for the second half of FP2. Mercedes' George Russell took P4 0.785 seconds off the pace, albeit with the caveat that there were no representative qualifying simulation runs in FP2, while Sainz was in aforementioned P5 with 0.808 seconds between him and top spot. Esteban Ocon was just 0.03 seconds off the Ferrari in sixth, while Perez took P7 in the other Red Bull as the first driver over a second off the leading time. Lando Norris raised eyebrows with a sideways exit out of his McLaren garage to start the session, and 20 minutes in, he took a short trip across the Turn 1 grass before finishing P8 ahead of Haas's Nico Hulkenberg, while Pierre Gasly rounded out the top 10 for Alpine. Yuki Tsunoda took the second of four allocated gearboxes ahead of FP2, and the Japanese racer finished 11th ahead of 12th place Alfa Romeo driver Valtteri Bottas. Behind 13th place Hamilton was home hero Oscar Piastri, who received another warm welcome from the capacity crowd on Friday, while Zhou Guanyu was 15th in the other Alfa Romeo. Lance Stroll tapped the barriers on the high-speed run turns 9 and 10 with around 20 minutes on the clock, and the Aston Martin driver almost hit the walls out of turn 10 later in the session as he lapped on intermediate tyres. He finished 16th in front of AlphaTauri's Nick de Vries. Alex Albon finished 18th, but his teammate Sargent didn't complete a lap in FP2 after a suspected electrical issue halted his Williams in FP1. Between the Williams was Haas's Kevin Magnussen in P19. Third practice and qualifying are set to be dry and warm on Saturday, with practice 3 taking place at 12:30 p.m. local time in Melbourne. We will move then to practice 3, where Verstappen led Alonso and Ocon in incident-filled third practice session in Melbourne. Max Verstappen led the way in an eventful third practice session in Melbourne, with the championship leader placing ahead of Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon as the drivers got their final preparation laps in ahead of qualifying later today. As the lights turned green, it was Lance Stroll who led the drivers out onto the track for a start of a busy hour of running as they looked to make up for lost time from Friday's rain-affected FP2 session. Carlos Sainz in P7 set the early pace on the soft tyres with a time of 1 minute 18.127 seconds to lead his compatriot Fernando Alonso by 0.202 seconds, as many drivers went for long high fuel runs to start the day. However, the drivers' preparation was briefly halted by a red flag as the marshals had to come onto the track to clear a piece of bodywork that had flown off Nick de Vries' AlphaTauri on the entry to turn 9. He ended up in P19. However, with the track now clear, times began to tumble, with Max Verstappen setting a time of 1 minute 17.565 seconds to lead Alonso in the Aston Martin by 0.162 seconds. It was an impressive display from Alpine, with Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly going third and fifth, respectively, with a French pair sandwiching the Mercedes of George Russell in fourth. The other Red Buller, Sergio Perez, was sixth after enduring a messy FP3 that began with him leaving the pit lane 20 minutes into the session as work was carried out on the rear suspension of his RB19, with the Mexican also struggling with his braking into turn 3 especially, much to his frustration. The aforementioned Sainz was seventh, although he will be thankful to have escaped heavy damage after going off at turn 11 on his way back to the pit lane at the end of the session. The Spaniard finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton in P8 and Lance Stroll in P9. Zhou Guanyu was 10th, although he was also lucky to escape serious damage to his Alfa Romeo after going off the track and making contact with the barrier at turn 2. Nico Hulkenberg was 11th for Haas ahead of Alex Albon, with the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in 13th. Home hero Oscar Piastri, who continued to be greeted with cheers from the Melbourne crowd each time he left the McLaren garage, was 14th, ahead of the other Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, with Yuki Tsunoda in 16th. Logan Sargent returning to the track after missing FP2 on Friday with an electronics issue on his Williams was down in 17th, ahead of Kevin Magnussen in 18th. Nick De Vries in the AlphaTauri was 19th, with Lando Norris at the bottom of the pack, with the McLaren driver being confined to the garage late in the proceedings with a suspected clutch problem on his MCL 60. Qualifying took place at 4 p.m. on the Saturday at Albert Park ahead of Sunday's race, where Verstappen claimed first ever Melbourne pole as Russell bags front row start. Max Verstappen drew level with Fernando Alonso by taking his 22nd career pole in qualifying for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix, while Mercedes' George Russell qualified second and Sergio Perez ended up 20th after a Q1 crash. Verstappen set a time of 1 minute 16.732 seconds to take his first Australian Grand Prix pole, ahead of Russell, who was 0.36 seconds off in Q3. Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton ended up third, 0.372 seconds off the pace, while Fernando Alonso was 0.407 seconds off the pace in P4. Carlos Sainz qualified fifth for Ferrari in front of Aston Martin's Lance Stroll, while Charles Leclerc struggled on the way to P7. Alex Albon managed a stellar P8 for Williams to leave Alpine's Pierre Gasly 9th and Nico Hülkenberg 10th for Haas. Yellow flags flew in Q1, where the official risk of rain was 90%, as Logan Sargent went off track just before Perez brought out red flags by locking up and beaching his Red Bull in the Turn 3 gravel, having struggled throughout FP3. Conditions stayed dry and Verstappen set the fastest time in Q1 ahead of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. In Q2, Verstappen continued his run to top the session ahead of Alonso, which set up a nail-bite in Q3 where Verstappen took provisional pole but reported gear shift issues. Despite that, he improved to cement pole with a blistering effort. Alpine's Esteban Ocon was caught in traffic and eliminated from Q2 in P11, 0.08 seconds off safety, while Yuki Tsunoda was visibly annoyed at being held up in the pit lane weighbridge before he was eliminated in P12 for AlphaTauri. McLaren's Lando Norris made a brace of mistakes in Q2 and finished P13 ahead of Haas's Kevin Magnussen, while Nick De Vries finished 15th in qualifying for AlphaTauri. Home hero Oscar Piastri was 0.047 seconds off safety in Q1 as the McLaren driver qualified 16th ahead of Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu and Williams' Sargent in P18. Valtteri Bottas hit traffic in Q1 and qualified 19th, leaving Perez 20th after his Q1 excursion. So in Q1, Perez locked up and bows out while Verstappen goes fastest. Fans donned ponchos as the green light turned on for qualifying, with the official risk of rain at 90%, but drivers emerged on slick tyres to make use of dry conditions at the start of Q1. Just 6 minutes into the session, Williams' Logan Sargent brought out a yellow flag by going off the track at Turn 13, and 1 minute later, Red Bull Sergio Perez locked up at Turn 3 and beached his car in the awaiting gravel. "We need to sort out the issue," said Perez, who struggled with his car in FP3. "It was the same fucking issue again," he said. The clock paused with 11 minutes and 44 seconds remaining in Q1 with Nico Hülkenberg top of the timesheets and 10 drivers yet to set a flying lap. When the session resumed, laps came thick and fast, with drivers fueled up for multiple laps as their soft tyres held up in the cool conditions. Eventually, Max Verstappen held top spot with an effort of 1 minute 17.384 seconds as George Russell was 0.27 seconds off in P2 and Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton third by 0.305 seconds. Esteban Ocon made a late jump to fourth for Alpine, 0.386 seconds off, to leave the Aston Martins 5th and 6th, with Fernando Alonso ahead of Lance Stroll. Carlos Sainz took P7 in front of Albon, who was on the pace throughout in his Williams, while Hülkenberg improved and took P9 ahead of Haas teammate Kevin Magnussen. Charles Leclerc made a late mistake and the Ferrari driver ended up 11th ahead of McLaren's Lando Norris and Alpine's Pierre Gasly. Both AlphaTauris made it to Q2 with Nick De Vries ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in a top 15 split by 1.087 seconds. Home hero Oscar Piastri was first in the drop zone, 0.047 seconds off safety in P16, while Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu was narrowly off in P17 and Williams' Sargent not far back in P18. Valtteri Bottas struggled with traffic and ended up 19th to leave Perez 20th. So knocked out in Q1 was Piastri, Zhou, Sargent, Bottas and Perez. So in Q2, Verstappen leads Alonso in close cut Q2. Opening salvos saw Verstappen lead Alonso by 0.064 seconds and Leclerc go third by 0.341 seconds as drivers continued their constant lapping on soft tyres to take advantage of the rapidly evolving conditions. Meanwhile, Magnussen, De Vries and Norris, who went into the gravel at turn 3, Ocon and Gasly were in danger of being eliminated from Q2. A dilemma began to emerge as drivers had to decide whether to continue on their used softs, which seemed to be serving them well, or take the gamble to pit and invest the time into scrubbing a set of new softs to put them into the right window for a qualifying run. Verstappen donned a new set of softs and improved by a tenth with a lap of 1 minute 17.056 seconds, dodging a bird in the process, but Alonso declined to do the same and retain P2. Sainz took P3 0.293 seconds off the pace ahead of teammate Leclerc, while Hulkenberg impressed again for P5. Albon was the last driver in safety, setting the fastest sector and taking P10 at the expense of Ocon, who was 0.08 seconds off safety in P11. Furious at being held up in the weighing station during Q2, Tsunoda was 12th, while Norris collected a tiny strip of gravel at turn 11 and ended up 13th in Q2. Magnussen took 14th and De Vries rounded out the Q2 standings in P15. So knocked out in Q2 was Ocon, Tsunoda, Norris, Magnussen and De Vries. And in Q3, Verstappen puts on a show while Russell blazes to front row. Verstappen needed 2 laps to put in a representative lap in Q3, and with 5 minutes remaining, he did so, taking provisional pole with a time of 1 minute 17.262 seconds, leaving Hamilton 0.009 seconds off and Alonso 0.041 seconds behind in P3. Rain was on the cards with drivers expecting it to hit at the very end of qualifying. Verstappen may have been top, but he reported gear shift and battery issues after his flying effort. Would we have a non-Red Bull on pole for the first time since Sao Paulo 2022, or would the Dutchman be able to match Alonso and take his 22nd career pole? The Red Bull driver duly turned on the afterburners, setting the fastest time in sectors 1 and 3 to improve to 1 minute 16.732 seconds and take his first pole in Australia, also drawing a level with Alonso with his 22nd F1 career pole. Russell, meanwhile, ended up just 0.236 seconds off the pace in P2, ahead of Hamilton in P3, while Alonso had to settle for 4th ahead of compatriot Sainz. Stroll split the Ferraris in 6th ahead of Leclerc, while Albon took P8 for Williams, Gasly 9th for Alpine and Hulkenberg 10th for Haas, 1.003 seconds off the pace. Verstappen said after qualifying, I think the last run was very good. The whole weekend it has been very tough to get the tyres in the right window to push them straight away, but it all worked out in Q3. Very happy with the lap and of course very happy to be on pole. Already looking forward to tomorrow. I've been on the podium once, but I want to be on a different step this time. The 2023 Australian Grand Prix began at 3 p.m. local time the next day on Sunday, where Max Verstappen was seeking his first victory down under and Mercedes were hoping to upset the Red Bulls for the first time this season. So we will move to the race then, where Verstappen took his first ever Australian Grand Prix win amid huge drama in Melbourne. Max Verstappen claimed victory during a wild and action-packed Australian Grand Prix, overcoming battles with the Mercedes drivers, several safety cars and 3 red flags to lead home Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Verstappen lost out to both George Russell and Hamilton at the original race start before the safety car made 2 appearances in quick succession due to Charles Leclerc retiring from a collision with Lance Stroll and Alex Albon crashing out heavily. Subsequent red flag for Albon's incident brought the field back to the pits, with Hamilton leading Verstappen and Alonso taking advantage of misfortune for Russell and Carlos Sainz, who were the 2 frontrunners to take on fresh tyres just before the stoppage. With a free choice of tyres for the restart, Hamilton initially held the lead from Verstappen, but the Red Bull drivers soon got within DRS range and moved back into P1. Moments before Russell's misery was compounded by an apparent engine failure, Verstappen brushed off the early drama to move into a comfortable lead as the race developed, while Hamilton held P2 and set about managing the gap back to Alonso, who was joined by the recovering Sainz and Pierre Gasly in a fight for the podium positions. But just as the order appeared to be locked in, another safety car and then another red flag was triggered late on when Kevin Magnussen thumped the wall exiting turn 2, losing his rear right wheel and spread debris from his Haas over the racing line. It meant a third standing start and the prospect of a 2-lap shootout on soft tyres, but just a matter of seconds passed before further contact and drama as Sainz tipped fellow Spaniard Alonso into a spin into the turn 1 bottleneck. Behind, Gasly took avoiding action and collided with Alpine teammate Esteban Ocon as he rejoined the circuit, putting both drivers out on the spot, while Logan Sargent ran into the back of Nick De Vries and Sergio Perez, who had risen from the pit lane, and Stroll had separate off-track excursions. After some confusion over how the race would proceed and the results would be determined, proceedings were resumed and ultimately settled behind the safety car in the order of the previous start, minus the cars that had been eliminated. A rolling start took the field around to the checkered flag, with Verstappen closing the line for his first victory in Australia as Hamilton and Alonso completed the podium ahead of Sainz, Stroll, Perez and Lando Norris. However, Sainz was hit with a 5-second time penalty for his crash with Alonso, promoting everyone behind him as Nico Hulkenberg took P7 from home favourite Oscar Piastri, Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda, inheriting the final point, and Valtteri Bottas. De Vries, Sargent, Magnussen, Russell, Albon and Leclerc all watched the final laps from the sidelines as the sun set on a hugely dramatic day at the Albert Park circuit. So as it happened then, after mixed conditions in practice and qualifying, blue skies and pleasant temperatures greeted the paddock for race day, with slick tyres the order of the afternoon and a one-stop strategy the quickest option, providing there were no incidents or safety cars. In the race build-up, there was a change to the grid as both Perez, who slid out of Q1 in qualifying, and Bottas, the slowest of the drivers to post the qualifying time, swapped their starting slots for the pit lane, having made various car changes under Parc Ferme. As for the starting tyre choices, the majority of drivers opted for the medium compound, but the Alpines and Alfa Romeos picked softs, while De Vries' Alpha Tauri, Sargent's Williams and Perez's Red Bull had hards bolted on for a longer first stint. When the lights went out down under in front of a capacity crowd, there was immediate action as Russell charged off the line and got a run on Verstappen into turn 1, which he converted with some late braking and smart car positioning. With Verstappen's exit compromised, the Dutchman then came under pressure from Hamilton, who promptly made it a Mercedes 1-2 by muscling his way past at turn 3, Verstappen complaining over the radio that he pushed me off the track. Just behind there was further drama as the Aston Martins and Ferraris went wheel to wheel into turn 3, resulting in contact between Stroll and Leclerc under braking that sent the latter into the gravel and out of the race. A quick steward's investigation settled on no further action. With the safety car delayed and the frantic proceedings briefly paused, a host of drivers pitted for some early tyre changes. Ocon, Zhou and Bottas came in to swap their softs for hards, while Sargent and Perez swapped their hards for mediums. When the action resumed at the end of lap 3, Russell held the lead from teammate Hamilton. The recovering Verstappen signed Alonso and the fast-starting Albon, but just 3 tours later, the Williams man slammed into the barriers at turn 7 and signalled another safety car. Russell, who had just started to come under pressure from Hamilton and complained over the radio that Mercedes were asking me to manage and I'm being attacked, pitted from P1 under the caution to change his soft tyres for hards, a move mirrored by Sainz, both drivers looking to benefit from Albon's accident. In response to those stops, Hamilton rued that the situation had put me at a massive disadvantage, but it would soon shift in his favour when the red flag was thrown due to debris and gravel on the track, meaning all drivers returned to the pit lane and could change their tyres. With the race stopped, Hamilton held top spot ahead of Verstappen, Alonso, Stroll and Gasly, as Hulkenberg and Russell, who radioed Mercedes to stress that the lost places were not your fault. Tsunoda, Norris and Piastri rounded out the top 10. Like Russell, Sainz lost out from his stop just before the red flag and dropped to P11, shouting no over the radio several times, but he was at least still in the race, unlike teammate Leclerc and Albon, both of whom were unharmed in their respective incidents. After the delay, the safety car led the field out of the pits and back to the grid for the restart, with Hamilton leading a particularly slow formation lap, the knock-on effect being several near misses towards the rear of the field as cars backed up. All drivers on hard tyres, aside from De Vries and Sargent, who chose mediums, Hamilton got away well to keep the lead from Verstappen into turn 1, with Alonso holding third from Gasly, Russell, Stroll, Hulkenberg and Tsunoda. Further back, Ocon and De Vries had a coming together that briefly sent the rookie airborne, but both drivers continued on their way and ensured that for the time being there were no additions to Leclerc and Albon on the retirement list. Over the following laps, Sainz used the pace of his Ferrari to quickly recover the lost ground and work his way back into the points, paying positions, dispatching the McLaren drivers before pulling moves on Tsunoda, Hulkenberg and Stroll for P6. Up front, after initially biding his time when the race restarted, Verstappen closed in on Hamilton's Mercedes, got within DRS range and reclaimed the lead of the race by breezing past his 2021 title rival along the back straight. Meanwhile, Russell cleared Gasly for P4 with an impressive move around the outside of turn 11, as news came in that there will be no further investigation over the contact between Ocon and De Vries at turn 3, nor the restart procedure following Hamilton's slow formation lap. Having overhauled Hamilton and moved into clean air, Verstappen unleashed the full pace of his Red Bull and stormed 3 seconds clear as the reigning world champion looked to take control of the race and claim his first Australian Grand Prix win. On lap 18, there was yet more drama as Russell ground to a halt on the start-finish straight with flames coming from the back of his Mercedes, bringing out the virtual safety car and once again stabilising the gaps between cars and up and down the order. With Russell's car cleared, green flag conditions resumed and Verstappen got back to it in P1, leading Hamilton by a slightly reduced margin of 2.5 seconds, as Alonso held third from Gasly, Sainz, Stroll, Hulkenberg, Norris, Tsunoda and Piastri. On a charging P11 was Verstappen's teammate Perez, who had worked his way up the order amid the drama and found himself knocking on the door of the points, which he duly moved into a move on Piastri into turn 9 before jumping Tsunoda. As the race neared half distance, Hamilton expressed concerns over whether his hard tyres would make it to the checkered flag, with Verstappen continuing to pull away and look more and more comfortable in the lead with a series of fastest laps. Behind, Sainz got past Gasly for P4 with a clever move, pulling off a dummy from left to right into turn 3, while Tsunoda dropped out of the points after losing out to both Ocon and Piastri. On lap 31, Verstappen moved more than 8 seconds clear of Hamilton, but the battle for P2 was much closer, with Alonso keeping his Aston Martin within touching distance of the Mercedes as Sainz continued his charge and taking out both taking both Gasly and Stroll with him. At this point, Hamilton was told that Alonso keeps trying to push you to make you use your tyres, so let's not fall for it. Before the 7-time world champion questioned that they can't be on the same strategy as us. As the laps tick by, the gaps between Hamilton, Alonso and Sainz constant, with the younger change at the front being Verstappen's advantage, which stretched out to the 10-second mark by lap 41. In the other Red Bull, Perez found the McLaren and Norris a more challenging hurdle to jump over, but he eventually managed to do so with DRS down the back straight before swiftly pulling a move in on Hulkenberg into turn 11. Hulkenberg then fell into the clutches of Norris, who attempted an overtake on several occasions before slotting ahead with a move coming out of turn 11, exploiting Hulkenberg's slow exit and surging ahead when the German ran wide at the following corner. A lock-up for Verstappen into turn 13 during the closing stages raised some eyebrows on the Red Bull pit wall, with his trip across the grass bringing a 10-second lead over Hamilton down to 7.5 seconds, creating some late jeopardy. The jeopardy took on a new form a few laps later when Magnussen hit the wall exiting turn 2, which removed the rear right wheel from his Haas and brought out a late safety car, given the debris that had been left over the circuit. Race control then opted for a second red flag to allow marshals to clean up the track surface and enable a finish under green flag conditions, meaning a 2-lap shootout for the win with no DRS. However, that shootout was over in the dash, with Verstappen defending from Hamilton into turn 1, but Sainz sending Alonso into a spin, causing chaos behind as several drivers tried to take evasive action. One of those drivers was Gasly, who slipped his way across the grass runoff, but collected teammate Ocon when he made his way back onto the track, sending both drivers out the race with significant damage. Meanwhile, Sargent hit the freeze. Perez went off at turn 1 and dropped back, and Stroll outbraked himself into turn 3 to take a trip through the gravel, with a red flag shown again to clear up more mess. It was then confirmed that the safety car would lead the field around one more time to officially end the race, with Verstappen making up for his 2022 retirement here to take the win from Hamilton, Alonso, Stroll, Perez and Norris. Sainz's penalty dropping him to P12. Hulkenberg pounced on the trouble around him at the penultimate restart to emerge fourth, but the reshuffling of the order for what would be the final run to the line meant he had to settle for 7th, as Piastri made it a double points finish for McLaren on home soil. Zhou and Tsunoda also benefited from the late incidents to round out the points, with Bottas and Sainz the final finishes of the day after the DNFs for Gasly, Ocon, De Vries, Sargent, Magnussen, Russell, Albon and Leclerc. Verstappen said, "It was great to win here, my first win as well. It's been a while for the team as well, but very, very happy. But also it's still great to see that the fans are having a good time even now. They had a long wait for the whole day, so I'll say a big thank you to them as well for sticking around. We had a very poor start, and then lap 1 I was careful because I had a lot to lose and they had a lot to win. After that, I think the pace of the car was quick. You could see that straight away. We were always there waiting for the DRS to open up to have a chance to pass. But with these red flags, the first one, maybe you can do it. But I think that second one, I don't really understand, was a bit of a mess, but we survived everything. We had good pace on the car today again, and we won, which is, of course, the most important. F1 will now head into an almost month-long break before reconvening at the Baku City circuit from April 28th to 30th for the 2023 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which will see the sprint format make its first appearance of the season. So that is it for this video then, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel, hit the Apex TF1 channel, and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care and goodbye for now.